So when I saw you then, we were taking a look at what happens with the Battle of the Bulge. Now you have to remember the significance of this. This is really Hitler's last chance. He puts all his chips in the middle and loses. He loses all this manpower and planes. Basically, the Luftwaffe is destroyed. All these tanks that they'll never be able to replace. The writing on the wall is there. The war's going to come to an end. It's just a matter of how that's going to take place. So when we can see that the war is going to come to an end, we need to figure out exactly how we want this to happen. Now, I do want to remind you real fast, because we had talked about this before. When World War I comes to an end, how does it end? Just kind of stops. Well, the Allies have no intention of just stopping the war. They need it to be done. They need it to be decided. They need Germany to fall. Now, we're well on our way to doing that, but we do need a plan. So the big three allies are going to meet at what's called the Yalta Conference. When Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill get together, what they are going to discuss is how is the war going to come to an end, and what's going to happen for the post-war world. What's going to take place once our common enemies were going to be defeated. Now, this is very different from how World War I ended. Because remember, for World War I, they just signed a ceasefire, an armistice. They just said, on this day at this time, we're going to stop fighting. And we'll just call it the end. The Allies have no intention of doing that again. They want unconditional surrender. They want Germany to understand this time, you have been defeated. You have been defeated soundly. Because there's an old saying that goes with this. The saying is, the victor is not the victor until the vanquished accepts their defeat. So I'll say it again. The victor is not the victor until the vanquished accepts their defeat. What this is saying is the war's not over until one side accepts that they're done. Remember, at the end of World War I, you had all these Germans saying, how did we possibly lose? There were no foreign troops in Germany. We must have been betrayed. We must have been stabbed in the back. At the end of World War II, we want to leave nothing to chance. Now, we've kind of talked about this weird alliance. The three of them together. Now, keep in mind, Roosevelt and Churchill are the leaders of democratic republics. What about Stalin? Oh, he's not a fascist. That's very different. He's a communist. The only thing holding this alliance together is a common enemy that's about to be defeated. So what holds the alliance together once the enemy's defeated? Nothing. So you have these two camps, really. You have the Western democracies and a communist dictator. When they get together, they're thinking long term here. What's going to happen when the war ends? Now, Stalin doesn't really make any bones about it. He is going to say, I want to be certain that I never get invaded again. I want to expand communism throughout Eastern Europe. Now, expansion of communism is one of its pillars. It's a foundational part of the whole idea. It has to spread. So here's Stalin meeting with the Western Allies and telling them, I'm going to take what I have already, I'm going to control what I've already taken. So let's kind of look at the map. Ever since Stalingrad, the Russians have been pushing back. They're on their way to Germany. But if they're going to get to Germany, they got to go through Eastern Europe. So you have a situation where now the Red Army is going to march through Eastern Europe on their way to Germany. What Stalin basically says is, this is now mine. I'm taking all of it. I'm going to occupy it, but I promise I will have open and free elections. Should you believe him?
No.
No. So let's kind of play this out a little bit. Let's just say that Stalin doesn't keep his promise. What do?
You can't do anything.
You want to go to war with Stalin?
No.
This is the weird little relationship that they have. Yes, ma'am.
Well, wouldn't the other world leaders be kind of suspicious? Because, I mean, why would you trust them?
You should. Or, I mean, you shouldn't trust them.
Yeah, so, like, wouldn't they be like, I don't know. Like,
So what are you
maybe
gonna
we
do?
shouldn't do this. But, like, were they scared to, like, say no to him?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So let's kind of do it like this. They don't trust him. But what are you going to do?
Yeah.
He's going to take Eastern Europe. Now, you could stand up to him, but you start World War III. What do? This is the weird relationship of this. We have a common enemy, and that's it. Now that enemy's about to be defeated. But on the way back from Yalta, President Roosevelt is going to show that his health is very much declining. It's actually been declining for some time. He almost didn't make the trek to Yalta, but he knew he had to do it. The war's coming to an end. When he gets back to the United States, he goes to his home in Georgia, and most likely, he has a stroke. Now, we're about probably 95% certain of that. It could have been something else, but most likely it's a stroke. Roosevelt's going to die in office during his 4th term. The only president to serve more than 2 terms. He saw us through the Great Depression, and he saw us through almost the entire war. He's going to die about a month before the war ends in Europe. Now, the war's still going on in the Pacific. Now, I want to be certain that I highlight this because we're fighting in Europe and the Pacific at the same time. We're going to get to the Pacific a little bit later on. Unfortunately for Roosevelt, he never sees the end of the war. So we have a new president. Now, I need to ask, if something happens to the president, who takes over?
Vice President.
Vice president. Truman now becomes the president. Truman, as a vice president, was really just kind of a placeholder. Roosevelt didn't know him real well. He kind of checked some boxes, so he was fine as a vice president. The vice president is probably the least important position in the federal government until it's the most important position. You are one heartbeat away from being the president. When Truman takes office, he is visibly shaking. Now he has all this responsibility to end the war. And to make matters even harder on him, there's a very high-ranking general in the military who comes up to Truman and says, "We've got something. A brand new super weapon that we didn't trust you with knowing about. And now you're the president. I gotta tell you something." But we'll have to talk about that later. What we need to talk about now is how Germany finally falls. Now, I will tell you this. Ever since Stalingrad and ever since D-Day, the Allies have been squeezing Germany back down. It's now a race on the way to Berlin. Who's going to get there first? Is it going to be the Soviets, or is it going to be the Americans and the Brits? Now, both sides really want to get there first. You want to be the ones to enter Berlin. You want to end the war. You want to finish what you've started. Both sides are racing to get there. The Americans and the Brits are on the move. We're sweeping east and north. The Soviets are coming west. Who's going to get there first?
Soviet.
When we pause. Now again, maybe it's a conspiracy theory, I don't know. But it's real close. We're not sure who's going to get there when the Brits and the Americans say, let's stop right here. We need to kind of catch up our supplies. We can be a little bit patient. Maybe they want the Soviets to take Berlin. why do you think maybe the Americans and the Brits want the Soviets to take Berlin? What do you think, Ismail?
Just because this is the second time Germany started a war, so maybe if they're out of power, just for good, like they won't cause it.
Oh yeah, we need to end it. You're absolutely right. I'm saying, why do you think maybe we paused right here and let the Soviets in? Alan, what do you think?
If Russia owns Germany, they're kind of responsible for them.
Maybe. That's a possibility. I want you to kind of think about if Stalin gets there first versus the Western democracies. How might that look, do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Start another war. If they sit there and argue about whose it is.
Yeah, that's what Yalta's for. We got to figure this out. But you're right. I hear what you're saying. Sure.
The reason is because Stalin will most likely work Germany to the bones, Germans.
Maybe. And again, I say maybe. I don't know. Maybe we want to let the Soviets take Berlin because they will burn it to the ground. They will crush it. That's not what we do. That is not who we are. But it's definitely who the Soviets are.
Sure.
And it's what we
Without
do.
a doubt. So again, I don't know. Maybe we did need supplies to catch up. Maybe we were racing. And man, the Soviets got there first. What we're going to see is the Germans in the West the Americans are facing very light resistance to the Germans. In fact, a lot of Germans are going to run west to surrender to the Americans and the Brits. Why do you think they'd run to the Americans and the Brits?
They're not
More
gonna get
forgiving.
Because the Western Allies will treat them humanely. Soviet and Stalin, they're going to be in prison camps until 1955.
It's 10 years out.
A decade after the war is over. And who knows what Stalin will do. What they said, you never really know because you can't trust the Soviets' numbers. They said probably about 1 out of 10 German POWs survived. So if you fall into the hands of the Soviets, 90% chance you're not going to get out. That's the way it works. Because we have the Soviets getting to Berlin. It's defended by young boys and old men, with the recruitment age down to 12 years old. Adolf Hitler orders everyone to stand and fight for Berlin in a war that's already decided. It's just a matter of how Berlin's going to fall. Now, the Soviets, they want revenge. Keep in mind what we were talking about at Stalingrad. The human suffering there is hard to even imagine. It's so horrific. And the Soviets will never forget. And there are going to be pamphlets circling around the Russian army saying, it's now time for revenge. Don't count the miles you cover, only count the number of Germans you kill. It's time to kill the German. Stalin tells them, whatever happens in Berlin is perfectly acceptable. The city is yours. There are countless stories of what happens as the Soviets get to Berlin, as widespread murder and rape will take place on such a scale that it's said probably about 1 out of 10 women in Berlin are raped and murdered. Now the numbers go up from there because the Soviets can do whatever they want. So there are stories about the Soviet army going into buildings in Berlin, and all you hear throughout the night are just the screams of women, and then the building's on fire. They can do whatever they want. They are just given free rein, and Stalin tells them, take your revenge. Berlin, in the spring of 45, is the worst place in the world to be. Now, with that said, we got to talk too about what Adolf Hitler is doing during this time. He's still in Berlin. He is underground in a bomb-proof bunker while all of this is going on. And Hitler will never take responsibility for it. He will always say, to his last, I didn't lose this war. The German people let me down. Now, by this time, I was telling you guys just a couple days ago, by